5 true scary stories from McDonald's. I can see you. That's what she heard. 2 in the morning, alone in the restaurant. Drive-through headset on. She'd already checked the lane twice. No car, no person. Nothing but an empty parking lot and a darkness. And then a voice. Quiet. Close. Like it was standing right beside her. I can see you. She ran inside and never worked a night shift again. That's just the first story. These 5 people all did the exact same thing you've done hundreds of times, without a second thought. They stopped at a McDonald's.
One heard something that shouldn't have been possible. One sat down to eat, while a predator hid feet away from her children. One looked under a bathroom stall door and found a face already looking back. One felt a gun press into her spine in a crowd of 30 people, and no one noticed. And 4 friends pulled into a drive-thru late at night, and something came out of the dark to look in at them. Real people. Real accounts. All of them submitted to us directly. None of them have ever quite looked at those golden arches the same way since. If you're new here, you found the right place. Stay until the end, and whatever you do, don't watch this alone. Story 1. The Drive-Thru Ghost. Submitted by Mayard, 2015. I was the kind of employee every manager loves. 4 months into my job at the local McDonald's, and I was already volunteering for extra shifts, covering call-ins, staying late without being asked. I needed the money. I wanted to move up fast, whatever it took. So when my phone rang at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night, a night shift worker had bailed. I said yes without hesitating. This would be my first overnight shift. Ever. I told myself it would be easy. Half the customers, a laid-back manager named John who never once raised his voice. Easy money. I arrived at 8:30 and the place was slammed. I clocked in and carved my way through a wave of customers for the next 2 hours. By 10:30, it was over. The crowd dissolved like it had never existed. The lobby went quiet. The previous shift leader walked past me on his way out the door, patted me on the shoulder and said, "Good luck." Just that. No handover, no instructions, just good luck. Now it was me and John. He disappeared into the manager's office. I was left alone, running the drive-thru, the front counter, and the grill. All by myself, in an almost empty building. In the middle of the night. I told myself to stay relaxed. I told myself this was fine. Then the headset chimed. Ding! That familiar tone, the one that signals a car pulling into the drive-thru. I snapped into customer service mode. "Hi, welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you tonight?" Nothing. Static. White noise filling both ears. No engine idling. No voice. No movement. Just air. I sighed. This happens sometimes. The sensor was oversensitive. I waited. After about 3 minutes, the mic clicked off. I relaxed. Less than 60 seconds later, ding! Again. I rolled my eyes and repeated my greeting. Nothing again. Except this time, the mic stayed on. For 10 full minutes, I sat there with static in my ears. and somewhere around the 7-minute mark, I heard it. Breathing. Low, slow, deliberate. Not the random hiss of interference. Breathing. Like someone standing just outside the menu board, with their mouth pressed close to the speaker, doing nothing but breathing. My hands went cold. I told myself it was nothing. I ripped off my headset, grabbed a rag, started scrubbing counters that were already clean. Anything to keep my hands busy. Anything to keep from thinking about that sound. But then, for the 3rd time that night, ding! I nearly knocked over the entire condiment station. I put the headset back on, opened my mouth to say the greeting, and before a single word left my lips, a scream. Not a shout, not a yelp. A long, raw, shredding scream that hit me like a physical force. I ripped the headset off and threw it across the counter, stumbled backward, heart hammering so hard it hurt. For a moment, I just stood there, shaking. Then the shock curdled into something hot and angry. I grabbed the headset, walked straight to the back door, pushed out into the cold night air, and marched around to the drive-thru lane. I stood right next to the menu board. Looked left, looked right, looked down the road in both directions. Nothing. No car, no person, no shadow. Just the empty parking lot, the buzzing streetlights, and the cold black sky overhead. But the static in my headset hadn't stopped. The mic was still on. Whatever had triggered it, it was still there. Right there. And I was standing next to it in the dark, alone, and I couldn't see anything. Then the voice came, soft, slow, intimate, like it was right beside my ear. I can see you. I ran. I don't remember making the decision. One moment I was standing in the drive-thru lane. The next, I was inside, behind the counter, back pressed against the wall. I found John at his desk, squinting at the scheduling software. "What the hell was that?" He spun around. "Christ, man! You scared the life out of me. What's going on? Were you messing with me? The headset. Was that you?" "I've been sitting here for the last hour. I haven't touched anything." He turned back to his screen. I stood there, processing. The rest of the night moved in slow, agonizing increments. By 1:30, I retreated to the drive-thru alcove, leaned against the counter, stared at my phone, tried to lose myself in a game, tried not to think. Then I felt it. Cold air on my forearm. I glanced over. The drive-thru window was cracked open, just enough to let the night in. I didn't bother closing it. Went back to my phone. Slam! My phone hit the floor and the screen shattered. The drive-thru window had been thrown open, not drifted, not nudged, slammed. I had been standing 18 inches away. I heard nothing before it happened. No footsteps, no wind, no warning. I walked into the kitchen, stood there, stared at the tile floor, and I didn't move again until the sun started coming up. I never worked another night shift. I never went back to that McDonald's at all. And every single night since then, before I fall asleep, I say the same quiet prayer, that whoever or whatever, pressed its mouth to that microphone and breathed into the dark was just someone playing a prank. Because the alternative doesn't let me sleep. Story 2: The Predator in the Ball Pit. Submitted by Close Call. I'll be upfront with you. I don't like McDonald's. I don't like fast food. I actively try to keep my kids away from it. But on that particular afternoon, I had run out of options. My wife was at work. I was exhausted. I'd forgotten to go grocery shopping. My son, Chris, had been asking for McNuggets for 40 straight minutes with the relentless determination that only a small child can sustain. I gave in. The McDonald's near us was packed. The moment my 2 kids spotted the play area through the back windows, they were gone. Didn't even wait for me to ask what they wanted to eat. I ordered Happy Meals, found a bench, sat down with my coffee and watched them climb around the structure with a dozen other kids. It's the kind of moment where you let your guard down, and you shouldn't. I was halfway through my coffee when I noticed the boy in the ball pit. Chubby kid, red curly hair, maybe 6 years old, standing perfectly still while other children splashed around him. His face was wrong, frozen in an expression somewhere between about to cry and already given up. Eyes fixed on something across the room. I looked to see what he was staring at. Just a window. Just the parking lot outside. He's probably just tired, I told myself. Maybe he got hit by a ball. I went back to my coffee. But every few seconds, I looked up again. And every time I looked, he was in the same position, same expression, same stillness. Like a child who had gone somewhere else in his mind and hadn't come back. Eventually, he climbed out of the ball pit, and as he walked toward his mother, I noticed his pants were pulled down around his thighs. He was yanking them back up as he walked, face still blank, eyes still distant. My first thought, the only thought my brain would allow, was that he'd had an accident in there. I lost my appetite. I got my kids back to the car and said nothing. I'd think about it again until the following week. I was at the kitchen table, morning coffee, newspaper open. I read the headline, and I physically choked. At that same McDonald's, just days before, a man had been arrested. He had been hiding in the play structure, in the ball pit, concealed in the chaos of children and noise and the absolute trust that parents place in a brightly lit restaurant on a Thursday afternoon. The photo showed a woman being interviewed outside. She was crying, hand covering her mouth. I recognized her immediately. And the boy standing beside her, looking at the ground with those hollow, faraway eyes, had red curly hair. I set down my coffee, stared at the page for a long time. My kids had played on that structure that day. They had walked right past that ball pit. The only reason they hadn't gone in was because the slide on the other side caught their attention first. A moment of luck, a distraction, a few feet of plastic tubing, separating my children from something that would have followed them for the rest of their lives. I have never let my kids out of arm's reach in a public space since then. No exceptions. No, just a second. Not ever again. Story 3: The Man Under the Store. Submitted by M. Perkins, Dallas, 2002. My fear of public bathrooms goes back to middle school. Not germophobia, not anything medical. Just a deep,
bone-level discomfort with being vulnerable in a space where anyone can walk in at any moment. I learned early, avoid public restrooms at all costs. And I held to that rule for years, until my body overruled me. Late on a road trip back home, 3 of us in the car, me, Jessica, and Ruby. 11 at night, an hour from the house. I had been holding it for 2 hours. Jessica spotted a McDonald's off the highway exit. I was out of the car before she'd fully stopped. The women's restroom was at the end of a narrow corridor in the back of the restaurant. I pushed through the door and was immediately hit by a smell I will not attempt to fully describe. 3 stalls. I checked the gaps under the doors. Empty. Good. The first stall, unusable. The third, same. The second was cleaner, but the smell coming from it defied all logic. I had no choice. I went in, latched the door, though the bolt barely caught. Sat down. For about 15 seconds, the relief was total. Then the bathroom door swung open. Footsteps. Slow. 2, 3 steps into the room, then stopping. I held my breath, listened. No other stall being opened, no faucet, no sound of anyone doing anything. Just a presence somewhere in the room, standing still. Maybe they changed their mind, I told myself. Maybe they walked in and left. But the footsteps hadn't gone back to the door. I waited. 1 minute. 2. 3. And then, very slowly, I bent forward at the waist and tilted my head down toward the floor to look under the door of my stall. A face looked back up at me. A man's face. 6 inches off the floor, lying flat on the bathroom tile, with his chin pressed against the linoleum, staring directly up at me. Gray hair, matted and unwashed. A dark beard. Eyes that caught the fluorescent light in a way I never want to think about again. He was smiling. The sound that came out of me was involuntary. It started in my chest and came out of my throat before I even knew it was happening. I yanked my clothes together, burst out of the stall, and collided with the door. Behind me, laughter. Low, wheezing, delighted laughter. And then footsteps, fast, toward the back exit. Jessica and Ruby were already at the door by the time I got there. I pushed past them, walked straight to the car, and got in the back seat. When we finally pulled out of the parking space, I looked back at the restaurant one last time. He was standing in the spot where our car had just been. Upright. Completely still. Watching us pull away. And he was waving. Slowly. Steadily. Smiling that toothless smile. Like he'd known all along exactly which car was mine. Story 4. Robbed at gunpoint in the breakfast line. Submitted by Candescent Skies, Kansas, 2007. I want you to understand something before I tell you this story. I was not in a bad neighborhood. It was not late at night. I was not alone in a parking lot.
I was standing in a line of 30 people at 8 in the morning, in a bright, warm, crowded fast food restaurant, doing nothing more dangerous than deciding what to order for breakfast. And someone put what I believed to be a weapon against my spine and told me not to move. I'd been going to this McDonald's nearly every weekday morning for months. It was on my route to work. Quick stop, 10 minutes, same order every time. That Tuesday, the line was long. I almost left. I didn't. I stepped into line, pulled out my phone, started looking at the menu, even though I'd never once changed my order. And then, something pressed against the small of my back. Hard, cold. And a voice appeared, very close to my right ear. Don't do anything. The room didn't change. People kept talking. The cashier called out an order number. No one around me had any idea what was happening 2 feet away from them. My entire world narrowed to that point of pressure in my back. I'm just going to take your wallet. You stay still. You don't say a word. Everything will be fine. I have never, in my adult life, felt genuine terror like that. Not the movie kind. Real terror is stillness. Real terror is your legs turning to concrete and your brain going completely, devastatingly blank. I reached for my wallet. It wasn't there. I always left it in the car. My wallet was sitting in my cup holder, in the parking lot, in my locked car. Where the hell is it? It's in my car. A pause, and then, guess we're taking a little ride then. That sentence almost made my legs give out. Because the moment we walked out that door, I was alone with him. Away from the crowd. Away from the cameras. Away from the 30 witnesses who had no idea any of this was happening. Once we got to my car, I had nothing. My mind started moving. Not clearly, but moving. His voice was tense, strained at the edges, nervous. This wasn't a professional. This was someone desperate, which made him dangerous in a completely different way. It also meant he could be rattled. I swallowed everything I was feeling and started talking. Low, steady, like I was discussing the weather. I don't think you want to do this. $10 isn't worth 15 years in maximum security. Silence. Robbery with a deadly weapon is a first-degree felony, and I don't think you'd make it to the door before I ran. I was terrified every word would come out as a stutter. Somehow, they didn't. He leaned in. Shut up. I can see what you're wearing. I saw your car. There's more than $10. It hadn't worked. And then, chaos intervened. Jimmy! A woman's voice from behind us. A crash, a surge of movement. One of the boys who had just walked in had been shoved by his brother, stumbled backward, and crashed directly into the man behind me. I felt the pressure disappear from my spine. I turned. The man was on the floor, thin, wearing an oversized black hoodie. And something had slid out of his hand, lying on the linoleum floor between us. A gun. Matte black, nearly invisible against the dark fabric of his hoodie. I ran. He grabbed the gun before I made it 3 steps. For one fraction of a second, I was certain I was about to hear a shot. I kept running anyway, but it didn't come. He was never caught. As far as I know, he's still out there. I pay attention to everyone around me in a line now. I notice hands. I notice how close people are standing, whether they're looking at the menu or looking at people. But more than anything, what stays with me is the moment the pressure left my back, and I still didn't know if I was going to make it to the door. In that fraction of a second, anything was possible. And I was completely, utterly alone in a room full of people.
Story 5. The Creature in the Drive-Thru. Submitted by Marco Poco, September 2014. There's a specific quality to the world at 1 a.m, after rainfall. The streets are empty. The pavement catches the streetlights and throws them back in long, trembling reflections. The air smells like wet concrete and electricity. Everything feels simultaneously familiar and subtly wrong, like a stage set of the real world built slightly off scale. That was the world we drove through that night. 4 of us in my van, windows down. A sea had broken months ago. The road was empty. 2 miles of wet reflections between us and hot food. The drive-thru at this location had a feature I'd never thought about before. On the right side of the lane, trees. Not a forest, more of a dense strip, 15 or 20 feet wide. During the day, just landscaping, unremarkable. At 1 a.m, after rain, with every window in the van open, it was a wall of absolute darkness. We pulled up to the menu board, waited. No greeting from the speaker. "Hello? Anyone there?" Nothing. I was about to ease the van forward when the guy in the passenger seat said, Wait, stop the car." "Do you hear that?" We all listened. From the direction of the trees, a sound. Low. Rhythmic. Not quite a growl. Not quite anything I had a word for. Then I saw the eyes. 2 small points of reflected yellow-white light, 5 yards into the tree line. Low to the ground, unblinking. Looking directly at the van. Dog, I thought immediately. Stray dog, probably scared of the car. I started rolling up the windows on that side, just caution. Eased the van forward toward the service window. It came out of the trees. I only saw it for a few seconds before I got the last window up, but those few seconds were enough. The size of a large dog, maybe bigger. The proportions were wrong. Too long in the body, too angular in the joints. The skin was visible through patches of sparse, irregular fur, greenish-brown, like something that lived in the dark and rarely saw sun. The way it moved didn't match any animal I'd ever seen. Each limb seemed to operate on its own logic. We all went silent. What was that? Nobody answered. I kept my foot on the brake. We all scanned the windows. The trees were dark. The parking lot was empty. There was nothing to see. Where did it go? Someone in the back seat started to answer. Then the scream. From the back seat, a real, full-bodied scream, and every head turned. At the rear window, just above the bottom edge of the glass, was a pair of eyes, level with the glass, staring in at us. And above the eyes, horns. Small,
unmistakable, pointed. The kind of thing you might mistake for branches or shadows if you weren't looking directly at them, and seeing, with absolute clarity, that they were attached to something looking back at you. We screamed, all four of us, simultaneously. The thing let out a sound, high, sharp, like metal dragged across metal, and launched itself back into the trees, gone in an instant. I put the van in reverse and drove home without stopping. We sat in my living room until 4 a.m, lights on, every window locked, describing it to each other over and over. We looked things up. We asked people online. Nothing matched. Whatever came out of that tree line ran alongside my van and pressed its face against my rear window to look in at us doesn't appear in any field guide or wildlife database I've ever found. Its eyes were reptilian, vertical slit pupils, a color I still don't have the right word for. And the way it looked at us wasn't the look of an animal that was frightened or territorial or hungry. It was the look of something that had been watching us from the moment we pulled in, and had simply decided, at that moment, to let us know.
5 stories. 5 ordinary people at ordinary hours, doing the most ordinary thing imaginable, stopping at a McDonald's. And every single one of them left with something that never fully went away. A whispered voice they still hear before falling asleep. A newspaper headline that showed them how close disaster had come. A face on a bathroom floor that resurfaces in quiet moments years later. A gun on a linoleum floor. A pair of eyes in the dark that didn't belong to anything with a name. You've eaten at McDonald's, probably dozens of times, probably without a second thought. That's how it works. That's how it always works. The places we trust most are the ones we stop paying attention to. And something, someone, is always paying attention to us. Be careful out there. Stay safe. And maybe tonight, just cook at home.